Okay, good morning and welcome to the second edition of the HSSE HR Conclave. Now, before we begin formally, and I hand it over to my host our host for the program, Miss Joy Gupta. I would request my colleague Parul Tripathi to start with the HSSE gratitude prayer. I would just request all of you to just listen to it very carefully. And Parul, it's over to you.
Yeah. So we start with the gratitude prayer. Uh, I'm grateful for who I am. I'm grateful for what I can do. I'm grateful for the family I have. I'm grateful for the love I receive. I'm grateful for the love I give. I'm grateful for the respect I receive. I'm grateful for the respect I give. I'm grateful for the food we eat. I'm grateful to be a learner. I'm grateful to be a teacher. I'm grateful to the creator and the universe. I'm eternally grateful, grateful, grateful. Thank you all.
Thank you, Parul. We have this kind of a tradition of starting with the gratitude prayer for all our major events. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure now to hand it over to Joy Gupta, who is a wonderful HR professional herself, a fantastic associate of HSSE, and she's our host and moderator for our conclave. So let's welcome Joy Gupta.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful introduction and giving me this opportunity to be the moderator for today's session. And a very good morning and a very warm welcome to all. Thank you for joining us for the second edition of the virtual conclave by HSSE. I am Juhi Gupta, your moderator for today's event, and I am an HR professional with almost 14 years of experience. And in my current role as a corporate trainer, I'm delighted to be associated with HSSE as Project Lead Corporate Relations. I would also like to welcome Ms. Parul Tripathi as Project Lead CHIC Program and his thoughts on the leadership style relevant in today's and the time ahead.
Are you ready?
So over to you, sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you to my session on servant leadership, a topic which is very close to my heart. And leadership as a subject is extremely close to my heart. If you saw the poster which Juhi just showed, it had a book with Leadership Gita as the title. So this is my latest book, co-authored with A.S. Narayanan, who is the CEO of the Reach HCon Group, and he was a speaker in our last edition, in our inaugural edition. So I'm going to share a little news with all of you towards the end of the conclave. Yeah, if you all stay with me for this very interesting session on servant leadership. So I was normally not a very PPT kind of a person, but I just thought that this time I'll make it a little pictorial for you a little bit, bring in some images and share some very good examples of servant leadership. So I thought a PPT might just be appropriate here. So I've just put it into a PDF form. And but before we get there, can I have some quick responses in terms of we are very much on track in terms of our time. So can I have some very quick responses in terms of what's your understanding of servant leadership? What do you mean by servant leadership? Anybody? You can unmute and speak. I would prefer that rather than putting in the chat so that we can have a quick interaction. What do you mean by servant leadership? What's your understanding of servant leadership? Generally, people understand leadership, but what is this thing about servant leadership? Anybody? So, Milind, anything you would like to say?
I don't know why you chose me to speak.
No, because I can see you on the screen. So whoever is visible, I'm getting hold of them.
Oh, so I had to put off my screen now. Okay, since you asked, I will go by the word. I don't understand the meaning of it, and I know you may be having great thoughts in your mind, and we are going to explore that today. Servant leadership may be empowering people at ground level
Right.
can lead in future, something like that.
Okay.
Very,
Okay.
very, very.
Okay. Now let me ask somebody whose video is off. So Sheetal, you want to share what is servant leadership? So that Milind, you don't feel I picked on you. Though I can, you are a friend. So,
So we have
Sheetal, if you are
Amit
there,
Kumar
would
sharing
like to,
his
or
views.
anybody. I mean, it's let's make it a little bit interactive now as we come towards the end of this conclave.
So, sir, we have Mr. Amit Kumar sharing his insights through
Okay.
chat. He
Okay.
says
Yeah,
that
Amit.
as a leader, I'm an equal worker, not harping on the bossism.
Right.
So Hari, what I understand is, as Simon Sinek says, a leader is not merely in charge; he is responsible for the people in his charge.
Okay.
So, as a leader, if you have a
Right.
vision and motive to serve people,
Okay. Okay.
and
He's
that's
responsible
gonna
for his.
give you, yeah.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So let's look at. So you're all right. But let's look at specifically what exactly servant leadership means with some very interesting examples. Yeah. So just a second. Is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So basically, when we're talking about servant leadership, it's not a leadership style or technique. Rather, it's a way of behaving that you adopt over the longer term, right? So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to talk about the 8 tenets of servant leadership. You may want to make some notes around it. Anyway, the recording will be shared with you later. But in case you want to make some notes, either write it down mentally. And I'm going to give you some fabulous examples of each of these tenets. So we're going to talk about the 8 tenets of servant leadership. So what exactly is servant leadership? It is essentially about moving away from serving your own interests, and we find so many self-serving leaders in all walks of life, whether it's a corporate world, whether it's a political world, whether it's a social world, even within families, for example. So there are a lot of self-serving leaders. So you move away from that, and what you need to do is you serve your people. So you essentially serve people. Now, leaders or bosses who come with an egotistical mind would never appreciate this thing called serving people. We at HSSE are doing this conclave because we want to serve you somewhere. We want to serve your learning interests. We want to share some insights with you. That's the objective, right? And we are in this business because we want to make a difference to people by serving the learning requirements. So servant leadership is essentially about moving away from self-serving leadership to serving your people. For what purpose? So that they can grow individually and are capable to contribute towards accomplishing self and team goals. Right? So Milind, back to you, but I want to give a beautiful example of what you are doing. Milind has done over 100 shows where he has interviewed a lot of people, and he runs a forum called as Mind Parachutes Training. He is a servant leader. He's serving the learning needs of the community. He's getting people with a lot of pedigree experience, and he's interviewing them with a very selfless objective so that the learning goes out to the larger community. So that's what servant leadership is all about. Yes, you may be a boss, you may be a manager, you may have authority, you may have subordinates. However, your objective of being a leader is not to serve your interests, but it is to serve the interests of your people and help them to grow and help the organization grow. Right. So let's look at the 8 C's. And there are great examples of servant leadership from both mythology as well as history and even contemporary times. So I have picked Lord Krishna as an example of the first C, which is competence. Lord Krishna was, he was an amazing personality. Now, what is interesting about this incarnation of Lord Vishnu is that the incarnations of Vishnu also evolved with each incarnation. Now, if you see the typical picture of Lord Vishnu sitting in Vaikuntha, and he's lying on a serpent and he's surrounded by water, and he is the master. He is worshipped. He is served by others. That's in his original form. But the moment he takes the incarnation of Lord Ram, and the two most famous incarnations of Lord Vishnu are, of course, Ram and Krishna. And you see in the case of the Ramayana, how Ram is a hero because he serves his family, he serves his father, he serves his mother, he serves his countrymen, and he takes care of some of his friends along the way, and he serves humanity overall. So he's a fantastic example of a servant leader, Rama. And there are so many things to learn from him. But when you look at the incarnation of Krishna, Krishna is a very different leader, a very different personality altogether. And leadership researchers are also now talking about the varying leadership styles of Rama and Krishna. Krishna was a bit of a plotter, was a very tactical person, highly strategic, and you try to mess around with him, he will ensure that then you get the results that you deserve. So, but Krishna had great competence, and he took servant leadership to another level. He became the servant of his servant. Yeah, he became a charioteer to Arjuna, which is quite amazing. So you find this kind of humility coming from a leader of that stature, and he is obviously one of the most popular gods in Hindu mythology and one of the most worshipped gods in Hindu mythology. And it's almost like Krishna lives next door. His stories are so popular, and we have grown up listening to the stories of Krishna and Rama. So what did Krishna personify? What is one of the important qualities of a servant leader? You need to be competent. You cannot ask your team to do something which you yourself are not prepared to do. And if you see, the Pandavas are a reflection of Krishna, because the team is always a reflection of the leader. Now you go to Mahatma Gandhi, who is a symbol of courage, which is the next C in the servant leadership characteristics or traits. And courage is your ability. What is courage? How do you define courage? Courage is your ability to say yes or no. Yes to what is right and no to what is convenient. Does that sound a little familiar to all of us? Where typically leaders in tough situations say yes to what is convenient and no to what is right. But Gandhiji, my childhood hero, grown up listening about his stories, I wish I could ever meet him. But obviously I was born much later than after he died. But he lives in our consciousness. Even if you don't agree with Gandhi, you cannot overlook what he said. You cannot overlook what he did. And Albert Einstein said Gandhi was a gentleman whom the world will scarcely believe that such a person walked in flesh and blood. And he had courage. He had courage for sure. He went to jail so often. He was on the firing line so often when he was fighting against the British for our independence. And he said, my life is my message. So one of the important things to being a good servant leader is also courage. Now let's look at Mother Teresa, a symbol of compassion. You cannot be a servant leader if you don't love your team, if you don't have affection for them, if you don't care for them. That's the foundation of being a good servant leader, if you don't have compassion for them. Now, my memories go back to 1996 when I personally, my wife and I had an opportunity to meet Mother Teresa. What a moment that was at the iconic, hallowed Mother's House in Calcutta. And what a moment that was to meet this person about whom you have read so much. It had just one telephone line and just one ceiling fan. And that ceiling fan was in the visitors area and not in the rooms where the nuns were staying. What an amazing amount of dedication to service And I mean, there are no words to express how you feel when you are when you're standing in front of such a legend or such a person, such a great human being. So one of the things that Jack Welch said, what is true leadership? He said leadership is all about you. When you're not a leader, it is all about growing yourself. But when you become a leader, it is all about growing others. And when will you want to grow others? You will want to grow others only when you have compassion for them, only when you have affection for them, only when you genuinely care for them. Right? So far, we have covered competence, courage, and compassion. Now, let's look at another very important example and a trait of a great servant leader: communication. Martin Luther King Jr., you must definitely go to YouTube and watch his I Have a Dream speech. It's one of the most outstanding examples of public speaking. Not because of just the way he spoke, but because of the conviction with which he spoke, the sense of purpose and the mission with which he spoke. And I have taken a quote from one of the from that speech. This is one of my favorite quotes from that speech, which we have also quoted in our book Leadership Gita. He says, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character." What a beautiful expression! What a beautiful choice of words! And there is a story around I Have a Dream speech. You should watch it on YouTube. I think he went there with some prepared talk, and along the way he came into his own and he started sharing what was coming to him more spontaneously and naturally. So a servant leader also needs to be a great communicator. A great communicator does not mean only talking. Fundamentally, a servant leader must be a great listener. He must listen to what his team has to say and be ready to take feedback. We come to Dr. Verghese Kurian as a beautiful example of capacity. Now, you have capability on one side, but you also have capacity. And as a good leader, you should be able to fill in your capacity. Now, you saw in Ajay Sachdev's presentation about what Eureka Forbes had done. The leadership team at Eureka Forbes was essentially trying to build capacity in an adverse situation. And as a leader, as a servant leader, it's one of the very important qualities or traits that you need to possess to be able to build capacity. And that's what Dr. Verghese Kurian did with Operation Flood in the 1970s, when he converted a milk deficient country into a milk abundant country. And he used milk powder made from buffalo's milk, which was absolutely against the trend. And many people told him, how is it possible? Because this can be done only through cow's milk. But he did it through buffalo's milk because there was it was not easy to get cow's milk, but he reinvented the technology and he built the capacity. And one of the most outstanding leaders of our times and one of the stalwarts of the Indian nation. A great salute to Dr. Verghese Kurian. We look at Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. What a great human being. He brought in culture. He obviously had many other great traits like competency, communication, and so many other things, but he brought in culture. Now, what is culture for a leader? A good leader will develop a culture where the team is not afraid to approach him. He makes himself or herself approachable, where the team is not afraid to voice their opinions. They can confidently be candid in front of the leader, and they will not have the fear that there will be any repercussions of their candidness, right? So Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he set a shining example as a president of the country. And you know that the president of the country constitutionally is a more of a titular role. You don't have much powers. So despite not having authority, he brought in a tremendous amount of influence in that role as the president of India. And Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and one of the things I find so inspiring about Abdul Kalam sir was he died working. He was 80 plus, he was delivering a lecture, And as he was working, as he was talking, he passed away. And he's left behind a fantastic legacy, not only as a scientist, but in terms of a fantastic, fabulous leadership culture, which we must emulate in our lives. Then there is, of course, a leader should be able to command respect. And who better than Saurav Ganguly? So I've tried to take examples from mythology, history, social work, society in general, and then, of course, my favorite area, which is cricket. So Ganguly took over captaincy at a time when India was going through the match fixing scandal. And he converted a team which was generally touted as lions at home and lambs abroad into a world-beating team. They won a series in Pakistan. They drew a series in Australia. They competed really well in England. He laid the foundation to create future leaders. And that's what the job of a good leader is. He does not create followers. He creates more leaders, and he creates a path for more people to flourish. So a Harbhajan Singh, a Yuvraj Singh, a Zahir Khan, Virender Sehwag, all these people grew and flourished under the fantastic leadership of Saurav Ganguly. And so he commanded respect. You need to earn your respect. You cannot demand respect as a leader. A really good servant leader will always not demand respect. He will command respect. Now we looked at these 7 examples and 7 traits of a servant leader. But if the next trait, if a leader does not have, even if you have all the other traits, they have no meaning, and that is character. So what is common for all the servant leaders in this world? Good servant, great servant leaders in this world. They have character as the first trait, and then everything else falls into place. So you may have all other great qualities, but if you don't have the strength of character, then you cannot be a good leader. Then you are a manipulator. Then you're trying to use people. We should never use people. We should utilize people. We should leverage people. We should never use them. Because that becomes use and throw mentality. So character is what you do when no one is watching you. That's a classical definition of character. It's such a powerful definition. Character is what you do when no one is watching you. And all these great examples that I gave you about servant leaders, they all had this one thing in common. They had great character. And that's why they got the respect and the recognition and the love and affection of their team members. So what are the 8 C's of servant leadership? To summarize quickly: character, competence, courage, compassion, communication, capacity, culture, and command. So for competence, we looked at Lord Krishna as an example, courage, Mahatma Gandhi, compassion, Mother Teresa, communication, Martin Luther King Jr., capacity, Dr. Verghese Kurian, culture, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and command, Saurav Ganguly. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those questions, and hope I could add some value to your life through this little presentation on servant leadership. Thank you so much, and it's over to you, Jui.